Hello and welcome to this week's Property Marketing Monday. So, as you know, what I do is I look at the questions people ask me, comments I get, and any requests I get sent to me about what I cover in these sessions. And the thing I get asked about quite a lot is editing photos. So, some people feel comfortable with taking their photos. They don't necessarily feel comfortable with editing, or don't maybe understand the value of editing their photos. So what we're going to cover today is that editing step. So I'm just here in Lightroom. I've got Lightroom and Photoshop open, and I'll explain why. So why do I use Lightroom and Photoshop? First of all, so the reason I use Lightroom and Photoshop is I just quite like them. A lot of photographers do use Lightroom and Photoshop. Now I do most of my editing in Lightroom. And there's only certain things that I would do in Photoshop. And to be honest, a lot of the stuff in Photoshop you do there, I'd probably outsource anyway because it can be quite time consuming. So what we'll do though is we're just going to look at an internal shot and an external shot and see what we can do with these photos. Right, so let's start. So let's look at, first of all, this internal shot. So we go to develop mode up here, and then it'll open up here. And then what we'll do, we see the photo here. So we do most of the work with this panel down the side here. Now, I would quite often use presets. So a lot of the editing is already done for me. But what I'm going to do with this shot is I'm not going to use any presets, and I'm just going to step through it. So the first thing we might want to look at is using this button up here. We might want to crop the image. We might want to straighten the image up, whatever. Okay. Doesn't really matter what you want to do there. Now, one thing that I'll just mention about this is a couple of things. So for straightening up photos, you can use this auto function. So if we give that a click, it sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't work, it sometimes doesn't do anything. And in this case, it's just made a very minor change. So we'll just leave that as it was at 0. Also, the other thing is to lock your aspect ratio. So if you do crop it, it maintains the aspect ratio, so that if you've got number of photos that of a particular property, then you want them all to be the same shape and size. And by just locking that aspect ratio, that's the way to do that. But we're not going to change that on this shot here, so we're just going to leave that as it is. First thing I'm going to look at here is the white balance. So you can adjust the white balance manually here, and we'll look at that in a second. But first of all, I'm going to use this dropper, and I'm just going to touch down there. So that's done probably quite a good job. So what I want to do now, though, is just increase exposure, because that photo is a bit dark. So if I increase exposure, so it's brightened it up nicely. So then we're going to come back up here. The main one I play with is this blues to yellows here. And if we take it too far blue, you can see the white becomes a bit bluey and it makes the room look a bit cold. So what I like to do is maybe take it to about there. So it's not, perhaps, let's just redo this again. So yeah, it's a slightly lower. Okay, and that might be quite nice, but a lot of people like the rooms to be warmed up a bit. It gives it more of a homely feeling. So I'll just take that up a notch, and you can see it's made a bit of a difference to the colours. It's a bit warmer colours. So maybe we'll just leave it there for now. Now, with this window here is really blown out. Okay, and one of the things that I would do normally for a room with this kind of shot is I would do what they call a high dynamic range, or HDR photo, where you take 3 photos and merge them together. And that's a really good way of handling windows. But in this case, what we'll just try and do a few things. So if we take the highlights right down, you notice suddenly that window, we can start to see through it. So that's a good starting point. And then if we take shadows down as well, that's not had an awful lot of difference on the window, but what it does do is it brightens up the room. So you could take it to +100, or you could take it all the way down and then brighten it up with exposure. but let's leave it there for now. And then what we'll do is if we knock the whites down, you'll notice that the window starts to come in. So that's really affecting it. So I'll take the whites right down to there. And now we can start to see through the window. We can see the washing on the line down the end here. Now, that's not necessarily ideal. And then with the blacks, if we just bring the blacks down quite a bit, you can see how it just gives a bit more definition to the room all the way down there. But again, that window isn't having much effect on that. So with the blacks, might just drop that down to about there. That's quite nice. And I might then come back up here and just knock the exposure up slightly. Okay. So we've done that bit. So that's good. So let's move on. We can now look at textures, clarity, dehaze. I don't really use dehaze for internal shots. I really only use that for external shots. But you could bring up the clarity. So if we just knock up the clarity a little bit there, can you see the textures start to show up quite well? So we don't want to take it too far because it looks a bit fake. But if you bring it down, I wouldn't go much higher than that, but that's quite nice there. Okay, vibrancy and saturation. Let's have a play with these. Personally, I don't normally do much with these, but you can see the effect that it has there. So let's do the same thing with saturation and that there. So personally, I don't normally do an awful lot with the saturation. Let's just have a, maybe tweak it up a little bit there, but that's it. I wouldn't do much more in that shot. I won't worry about tone curves. Notice I haven't even got that opened up. So just open it up to have a look at it, but I don't necessarily worry about that. And with the colors here, for internal shots, again, I wouldn't worry too much about that or color gradings. Now this here is the sharpness and noise in the photo. So we see here, this is zoomed in on a part of the shot. I believe it's around here. And you can see it's quite noisy here and it's not particularly sharp. So let's do a couple of things here. So if we look at the sharpness amount, see how it's changing. If I take it all the way up there, that's a bit too far. So if we take it back to where it was at 40. There. Okay. Another way though, because sometimes you don't get a good image in here, you can move this around by clicking on it and choosing somewhere else. So let's choose the laptop there. So, or you can even just look at it on the big screen here. So you can do both. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tweak up that sharpness a little bit. So that's taking it far too far, I think. So let's take it to about 60. Wouldn't necessarily take it any further than that. And then where the magic really starts to happen is in the noise reduction. So I'm going to set that one there to 50. And I'm going to set all of these to 50. And you notice how photo starts to really smooth out now. And then with the smoothness, let's try pushing that all the way to 100. Okay, some people say that's taking it too far, but that's fine. And always click these two. So remove chromatic aberrations and enable profile corrections. That's just sorting out issues with the camera too. So the Lightroom knows which camera you use for the shot, so it can work out what it should do to correct those images. Right, so let's now come back out. And I want to look at transforming. So this can be a really useful tool for internal shots. So walls don't lean in like that. And if they do, there's a problem with the property. Walls are normally straight. And so that's what we want to try and do here. So you can transform using these manual settings here. But when we're doing editing of photos, you might have 100 photos to edit. So you want to make it quite quick. So what I do is I normally stick to these three here. I either leave it switched off, I put it to auto, or I put it to level. So let's just try it. Auto. What does auto do? Quite nice. It's just stretched it out a bit there. Quite good. Let's see what level does. Okay. So level and off, very similar. Just twisted it round slightly there. So scale there of 10. And then if we go to auto, That's quite nice. Okay, so I'd just leave it there. So if you start messing around with these, you know, you can do lots of weird things and turn them around, etc. But again, I don't even bother with any of these. You know, so you can notice you get the curve there. You can do lots of different things there, but don't spend your time on it. As I say, I normally use off, auto, or level. And then coming down here, I'm just scrolling down here to show you, but that's pretty much it. Okay, so for that photo, we're probably about there with that shot now. So now we can move on. So that's editing the internal shot. Now let's move to an external shot. So go back up to the top here. And again, we could crop or we could straighten the image up, but that's fine. We'll just leave that one as it is. Let's use the white balance. Now, I always try and click on something that looks white. You'll notice I used the skirting board on the internal shot, and I'm using the white there. For me, I just find it works quite well, and you get quite a good setting. So that looks okay. So we'll leave that there. I'm just going to increase that exposure a little bit. There we go. Nice and bright shot now. I'm now just checking to make sure I can't see myself here, because I've taken it pretty straight on. There is the chance of getting a reflection in those windows. So just be careful of that. And the one thing actually I didn't change on the last one was contrast, wasn't it? So we will play with contrast on this one. And I quite often would use contrast on the internal shots as well. But if we just push that up, just give it quite a long way. So you can see it's had quite a strange effect on the shot. So I'm just going to pull that down. And let's just click it to there, maybe. Just a little amount. And then with highlights, let's see what highlights do. Wow, you see what's happened to the sky? So it washes the sky out, or it actually brings the sky in. So I'm going to leave the highlights there. Shadows, that's a bit washed out. That's too far the other way. So if I go to there, what I could do is I could bring my exposure back down. Okay. So now you notice by putting the shadows up to there, my exposure is now at 0. Nice little trick. Now let's play with the whites. So I'm going to take the whites right down because I just like that slightly darker effect there. And then let's look at the blacks. I'm going to do a little bit of black there, maybe a little bit less than that, just to give it a bit of definition. And because I've played with the whites, I am going to now just pump up the exposure a little bit. Okay, you know, I said before, I could see myself in the window. Is that me there? Yes, it is. That's me taking the shot there. So what are you going to do when you do see something like that? There's a few things you can do. And you notice how when I started to edit the photo, actually I couldn't see it before, but as it becomes clearer, you can see these things. So one, you could just scrap the photo and move on and hope you got a better one. But let's try and fix it, and fix it quite quickly, because again, time is of the essence. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to use spot removal 2 on Hill, and I'm just going to do this. Okay, and right, so it's picked a bit down there. I don't really want it to pick that bit down there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that up to there next to it. And then let's see what that looks like. So let's go into 100% again. And when we navigate across, I'm just going to drag that across there so I can see them better. Right, so and what I'm trying to do is match those up a little bit better like that. And let's see what that looks like now. So I've taken myself out of it. It's not the greatest edit there, but just because this is an example, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but you can kind of see the idea of what we can do there. But I'd normally spend a bit more time on that and get that a lot better than that. So now, if we carry on down here. Now, what I might do on these is I'll come to colours. In fact, before we come to colours, let's do dehaze. Let's talk about dehaze. So I'll take the clarity up a little bit. Maybe that's enough. And then dehaze, let's see the effect that dehaze has. Dehaze is great for external shots. So I might just take the dehaze up to there. Again, it's really done some good work with that sky. And that sky is coming to a point now where it's actually quite usable, whereas before it wasn't very good. Okay, and then if we come down, now if we look at this bit of grass here, if we want to make that greener, we could do that, and notice how green it's gone now. Okay, so we've taken it way too far there, but you can see that you can increase the greens. So we'll leave it about there. And let's see what the effect if we play with the aquas are. Is it going to have any effect? No. So it only has effects on the colours that you've actually really got in your photo. So see how messing with the blues there, what it's done to the sky and the window. So you need to be careful because that just looks silly. So with the blues, we're just going to leave it where it is. Right, so again, down to details, sharpness. So on this, I want to use the brickwork there to work on the sharpness. So let's just pump that to there. Maybe that's a bit too far. Maybe leave it at 50. And then just go through all of these. And as a default, my starting point for editing would be to set all these to 50. And then with the smoothness, maybe take that to 100. But I don't always do that. But this is just to give you some examples of things to look at and to play with. Okay, so, and now, transform. I don't normally use transform for external shots, if I'm honest, but let's have a quick look at what effects it does on there. So, okay, that's really tried to straighten it up. It's made it look a little bit weird, so it wouldn't necessarily use that. So that's level, and that's off. So level's not too bad, actually. Yeah, I quite like level. I might leave it as level. So let's leave that as there. And then that's it. So now though, this sky. Now, many people use that sky, but what we can do, if we want to edit it, go edit in. So I've right clicked on the image and then come to edit in Adobe Photoshop 2021. And editing skies used to be quite difficult, but thanks to new functionality that has been brought out in Photoshop, it has made it so much easier. So what we're going to do now is come across to Photoshop and I'll then talk you through those steps. Previously though, I wouldn't edit my own skies. It's not something that I would do because it was just too time consuming and I could outsource it. But now it's super easy and I'm going to show you. So you come up here, we've got the photo now in Photoshop. You come to edit up at the top. You come down here to sky replacements. And you then just choose a sky. Now, I'm not quite sure what I was using that sky for last, but obviously I was. So just waiting for it to apply that sky. And if you have a look here, the photo, you'll notice when it's applied. And what it's actually doing now is it's editing the photo and putting that sky in for me, doing it all automatically. So all I've got to do is wait for it to do its job. Right, done. So it's put that sky in, but I don't want that sky. I want, there we go. How about let's try this one here. Blue sky with white fluffy clouds. That's always a popular look. So let's give that one a go there. So it's now applying that sky for us. So let's have a look, see what that looks like. Now, to me, that looks a bit false. So maybe let's try a different sky. Let's try this one here. Let's see what that one looks like. Okay, yeah, maybe that's a bit better, but you can have a play around using different skies. You can use all the ones here, or you can add in your own sky as well. Okay, so if you've got your own skies you want to use, you can do that. But let's leave it as that one for now. And then I'm just going to pull this up here. And we want to output it to a new layer. So what we'll see here, down here, is you'll see the layers. If I move me out of the way. So at the moment we have one layer. So we click OK. And now we've got multiple layers. So let's say that that image now is done. What we need to just do is to flatten the layers. So we can then export it. Excuse me. So flatten image. And now it's just put it into one layer down here. And then all we do now is do File, Save, and we come back into Lightroom. And what we'll see in a moment is, once it's brought it across, is we'll see that the image here changes in Lightroom. And it really is quite simple. And it's a very quick process to do. So that will be working its way across now. And then we will see the final image in a second. So it looks like it's updating it now. Here we go. So we got that image back now. So that sky it looks a bit too in your face, really. So I might try and soften that down. But I just wanted to give you an example of how easy it is now to replace skies in your shots. So today's Property Marketing Monday, we've covered editing photos in mainly Lightroom, but also a little bit of Photoshop as well, and really just to show you the process. Now, I'm not saying that we've covered everything today, because of course we haven't, but it's really just to give you an insight and to really demystify editing the photos, because some people think it's like a black art, and it really isn't that difficult. So I hope you found that interesting. Now, for next week, if you want me to cover any particular topics, let me know, and I will add them to the list, and we'll either get some next week or in a later week. Hope you found this interesting. That's the end of this week's Property Marketing Monday. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. So if you're still listening now, you definitely need to subscribe. Thank you very much. That's the end of this week.